My name is Sloan. I am 32 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my entire life was defined by the heavy, oppressive shadow of my family's legacy. We owned a massive chain of luxury boutique hotels spread across the East Coast. It was an empire built on old money, prestige, and a flawless public image. To the outside world, the Mitchell family was royalty in the hospitality industry. But behind the velvet ropes, the crystal chandeliers, and the perfectly pressed uniforms of our staff, the reality of my family was suffocating. I was always the invisible child. I was the outsider looking in, the one who never quite fit the mold of what my parents wanted. The breaking point did not happen behind closed doors. It did not happen in a quiet conversation. It happened in front of everyone, designed to inflict maximum damage. It was a Tuesday evening. A massive storm was rolling through the city, raining hard outside, the kind of torrential downpour that beats aggressively against the glass and drowns out the street noise. I was sitting inside the grand boardroom of our flagship hotel. The room was intimidating, lined with dark mahogany walls that felt like a cage. The air smelled of bitter espresso, expensive cologne, and thick, unspoken tension. Around the heavy oak table sat 20 of my relatives, board members, and top executives. At the head of the table sat my father, Gideon. He was a man who demanded the room's attention just by breathing. To his right was my mother, Rowena, her posture rigid, her face an unreadable, sculpted mask of polite indifference. And right beside her, basking in the warm, golden glow of their undivided approval, was my younger sister, Harper. My father was in the middle of a grand, sweeping speech, his voice booming across the room. He was praising Harper. Harper, who was only 26 years old, had recently been handed the title of Director of Brand Image. She earned this role not through merit, late nights, or any strategic vision, but simply by being his favorite. He was congratulating her on a recent social media campaign she had launched. It was a shallow, flashy project that involved inviting 50 noisy influencers to our most exclusive resort. It looked good on a phone screen, but it entirely ignored the core values of our actual clientele. I sat at the far end of the table isolated, looking down at the financial projections in my open folder. I worked independently as a crisis public relations strategist. I spent my days cleaning up messes for high-profile clients, analyzing market data, and stopping disasters before they ruined companies. My brain was wired to see risks, to measure consequences in hard numbers. And the numbers sitting in front of me were terrifying. I waited for my father to pause. He was going on and on about how many likes Harper's post had received. When he finally stopped to take a sip of his water, the room fell into a quiet lull. I cleared my throat. My voice was calm, measured, and strictly professional. I pointed out that while the campaign generated initial online engagement, our core demographic of long-term corporate clients had dropped their bookings by 12% in the last month alone. I explained that the flashy new image was actively alienating the wealthy, quiet professionals who actually paid the bills. I suggested a strategic pivot to stabilize our revenue before the quarter ended. I was just doing my job. I was trying to protect the family business from a very real, very quantifiable threat. My father's face went rigid. The warmth drained from his eyes instantly, replaced by a cold, furious glare that locked onto me. He slowly lowered his glass. The ice clinked against the crystal. Harper let out a soft, theatrical sigh, rolling her eyes and leaning back in her expensive leather chair as if I were a pest that had just flown into the room. My mother shifted uncomfortably, shooting me a look of pure, unadulterated annoyance. "You always have to ruin it, don't you, Sloan?" my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "I am just reading the data, Dad," I replied, forcing my heart rate to stay steady, keeping my tone even. "The numbers show a clear decline. If we do not address this immediately, we are looking at a $2 million deficit by the end of the year." He slammed his flat hand on the oak table. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the enclosed space. Several executives flinched. "I did not ask for the opinion of a glorified janitor," he roared. His face was turning a deep, dangerous shade of red. The veins in his neck stood out, throbbing with his pulse. He leaned forward, pointing a trembling finger directly at my face, across the length of the long table. You sit there, tearing down your sister's hard work, because you have nothing of your own. You have no vision. You have no loyalty. You are nothing but a cynic who cleans up other people's garbage for a living. You have spent your entire life trying to drag this family down just because you are too bitter to shine on your own. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. My skin burned with the humiliation of being dressed down like a misbehaving child in front of my peers, my clients, and my relatives. But I held his gaze. I refused to look down. I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Then he delivered the final blow. He leaned in closer, his voice carrying clearly over the dead silence of the room, every single syllable dripping with concentrated venom. You are the most worthless burden to this family. Forks froze on their porcelain dessert plates. Cousins stopped whispering. The heavy silence that followed was deafening, pressing against my eardrums. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my cousin Tegan slowly raise her phone, the red recording light blinking ominously in the dim room. She was capturing my humiliation in real time, preserving it. I looked at my mother, hoping for just a sliver of defense, a single word to stop the bleeding. She just stared at her napkin, smoothing it out with her thumb. I looked at Harper. She was smirking. A tiny, victorious smirk resting on her glossed lips. For a second, the pain was blinding. 32 years of trying to prove my worth, 32 years of fighting for a seat at the table, all reduced to ashes with one sentence. The shame was a physical weight crushing my chest. But then, right in the center of that pain, the shame burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard, untouchable anger. I did not cry. I did not argue. I did not scream. I stood up. The heavy wooden chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. I placed my right hand on my water glass. My fingers did not tremble. The glass was ice cold, grounding me in reality. I looked directly into my father's eyes, matching his fiery rage with a freezing void of my own. Then cut me out of everything, I said. My voice was steady, cutting through the heavy air like a scalpel. Your lives. Your will. Forget I exist. The room went dead silent. My father's expensive fountain pen dropped from his fingers, clattering loudly against the oak table. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Harper's smirk vanished, replaced by genuine shock. Without waiting for a response, I turned my back to them. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair and walked toward the heavy double doors. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor, echoing in the silent room, marking every step of my departure. I pushed the doors open and walked out into the corridor, leaving the empire behind. But as I walked out of those doors, stepping into the empty hallway, I had no idea that the worst moment of my life had just been recorded and was about to be broadcast to the entire world. The rain was coming down in sheets by the time I reached my car in the underground parking garage. The concrete walls echoed with the sound of the storm outside. I unlocked my sedan, slid into the driver's seat, and slammed the door shut, locking myself in the dark, silent cabin. The smell of damp wool from my coat filled the small space. For a long time, I just sat there in the dark, my hands gripping the leather steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My heart was pounding a frantic, uneven rhythm against my ribs. The adrenaline that had carried me out of that boardroom was beginning to wear off, leaving a hollow, aching void in my chest. The most worthless burden. The words echoed in my mind, bouncing off the walls of my skull over and over again. It was not a new sentiment. I had felt it my whole life. It was simply the first time it had been spoken aloud with such brutal, unfiltered clarity. They had always treated me as an afterthought, an inconvenience, a stubborn weed growing in their perfectly manicured garden. I started the engine, the low hum vibrating through the floorboards, and pulled out into the wet, empty streets of the city. The glow of the streetlights smeared across my windshield, turning the world outside into a blur of neon colors. As I drove aimlessly through the rain, the memories crept in, uninvited and sharp. I had spent my life walking through a mental museum of my own pain, surrounded by exhibits of their indifference and cruelty. The first exhibit was always the clearest, the foundation of everything that followed. I was 16 years old. I had spent 4 grueling weeks researching and writing a massive history presentation for school about the American Industrial Revolution. It was a project I poured my soul into, filled with original insights and careful formatting. I was hoping it would finally earn me a nod of approval at the dinner table. The night before it was due, Harper, who was only 10 but already manipulative and spoiled, went into my room, took my printed notes, and presented them to my parents as a creative story she had written for her class. When I found out and confronted her in the living room, she cried. She squeezed out fake, loud tears and ran to hide behind my mother's legs. Instead of holding her accountable, my mother turned her anger on me. "She looks up to you, Sloane," Rowena had said, her tone dripping with disappointment and exhaustion. "Why do you always have to be so selfish? Let her have this. It is just a silly school project. Stop making your sister cry over a few pieces of paper." They took my work, handed it to her, and made me the villain for wanting it back. It was the blueprint for the rest of our lives. Harper takes, I complain, and I become the problem. I turned a corner, the tires splashing heavily through a deep puddle. The second exhibit in my mental museum loomed ahead. When I turned 18, I knew they would never support my choice of a communications and public relations degree. They wanted me in hospitality management, learning how to fold napkins, arrange flowers, and smile vacantly at wealthy guests. So, I refused to ask for their money. I worked 3 jobs. I waitressed on weekends, worked at the campus library, and tutored freshmen. I studied until my eyes bled. I earned a full academic scholarship to a prestigious university. I remember running into the kitchen, exhausted but buzzing with pride, the official acceptance letter shaking in my hands. I showed it to my mother. I told her I got the scholarship. I told her I was going to pay my own way. I wanted her to be proud of my independence. She did not smile. She did not hug me. She just kept slicing vegetables on the marble counter and said, "Well, I suppose that saves us the trouble of writing a check. Make sure you pack your things quietly tonight, Sloane. Harper has a major dance recital this weekend, and she needs her rest. We cannot have you banging suitcases around the hallways." No celebration. No pride. Just sheer relief that I was no longer a financial obligation, and a reminder that Harper's hobbies were more important than my future. I pressed my foot harder on the gas pedal, the engine revving as I merged onto the empty highway. The city lights blurred into long streaks of yellow and red. The third exhibit was the most recent, and perhaps the most painful because it involved my professional worth. 2 years ago, a massive scandal hit one of our rival hotel chains, involving a VIP guest and a very public altercation. It was a media disaster that threatened to spill over and taint the entire luxury market, causing a panic among investors. My father was terrified. He did not know how to handle the modern digital press. I stepped in. Working quietly behind the scenes, using my own extensive network of contacts, I drafted a flawless media strategy, suppressed the negative rumors connecting our brand to the scandal, and shielded our stock price. I essentially saved the company from a $2 million fallout. When the dust finally settled, I sat in his grand office, hoping for a simple "thank you" acknowledgement that I had saved his neck. Instead, Gideon looked at the final analytics report, tossed it onto his desk with a scoff, and sneered. "It is a dirty business you're in, Sloane. Scrubbing the internet, hiding people's mistakes, manipulating journalists. It is essentially janitor work. Let us hope you never have to clean up a real mess. Now, please send Harper in. I need to discuss the floral arrangements for the spring gala." He reduced my expertise, my late nights, my strategic brilliance, to a mop and a bucket. I pulled into the driveway of my small, quiet townhouse on the outskirts of the city. The rain was still falling, washing the pavement clean. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence of the car. The museum doors were closing for the night. They had always viewed me as a failure because I refused to play their game. I refused to be a pawn in their hospitality empire. But Harper's blind arrogance, her desperate need for constant validation, was a ticking time bomb. They thought I was the burden. They thought I was the one holding them back. They always considered me a failure. But Harper's blind self-confidence is about to teach them a lesson that millions of dollars can't buy back. The fight in the boardroom did not come out of nowhere. It was a long time coming. It was merely the grand, explosive finale of a Cold War that had escalated just a month prior. I walked into my dark kitchen, tossed my keys onto the granite counter, and poured myself a tall glass of cold water. My hands were finally steady, but my mind was racing back to that Thursday afternoon 4 weeks ago. That was the day the final bridge began to burn. Gideon had summoned me to his private office at the hotel. It was a rare occurrence. He usually avoided me unless he needed a scapegoat for a bad quarter. When I arrived, he was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, a cloud of expensive cigar smoke hanging in the air. He had his fingers steepled beneath his chin, looking at me as if I were an employee who was about to be reprimanded. He did not offer me a seat. "Sloan," he began, his voice dripping with a false, heavy benevolence. "Your mother and I have been discussing your career." He always said the word career as if it were a disease I had contracted. "Harper is officially taking over the brand image department next month," he continued, leaning back in his chair. "She has the charisma for it, the charm, the face. But she lacks the administrative stamina to handle the day-to-day operations. We have decided it is time for you to stop playing around with your little freelance consulting gig." I narrowed my eyes, setting my purse down on a chair. "My consulting firm is highly profitable, Dad. I am managing accounts for major tech startups and finance firms. It is not a gig." He waved his hand dismissively, brushing off my achievements like lint on his suit. "Pennies. We are offering you a real job. You will come in, shut down your independent LLC, and work directly under your sister. You will handle her daily schedules, draft her press releases, manage the media contacts, and ensure her creative ideas are executed properly. We will pay you $60,000 a year." I stared at him, genuinely wondering if he had lost his mind. $60,000 was a profound insult. It was a fraction of what I made on my own, but the money was not even the worst part. He wanted me to be Harper's shadow. He wanted me to do all the heavy lifting, apply my strategic mind, put out the fires she inevitably started, and let Harper take all the credit in front of the cameras. He wanted me to be her servant. "You want me to be her assistant," I stated, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I am offering you a chance to finally contribute to this family," he snapped, his patience instantly vanishing. "It is a final favor, Sloan. A chance to stop being an embarrassment, to stop wandering aimlessly, and actually support the people who gave you life." "No." The word dropped like a heavy stone in a quiet pond. Gideon blinked, clearly not used to hearing that word in his office. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated, my voice firm and unwavering. "I am not closing my successful business to become Harper's secretary. I have built my reputation from scratch. I am not throwing my life away to prop up someone who does not even know how to read a quarterly earnings report." His face purpled with sudden, violent rage. He stood up, leaning aggressively over the desk. "You arrogant, ungrateful child. If you walk out that door, do not expect a single dime of my money. Do not expect the Mitchell name to open any doors for you in this city." "It never has," I said quietly. And I turned around and walked out. That was the true catalyst. That was the reason he exploded at the family meeting tonight. I had defied his absolute control, and he could not stand it. I leaned against the kitchen counter, sipping the cold water. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos I had just left. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and dialed the only number in the family that did not make my stomach turn. Aunt Maeve answered on the second ring. She was my mother's older sister, the legendary black sheep of her generation. She had walked away from the family money decades ago to open a small, struggling art gallery in Brooklyn. She was the only one who saw through the polished, toxic facade of the Mitchell empire. "I heard," she said softly. No hello, no preamble. Just pure understanding. "Tegan?" I asked, feeling exhausted down to my bones. "Yes." She has been texting the entire family group chat nonstop. "Sloan, honey, are you all right?" I closed my eyes, letting my head rest back against the cabinet. I told them to cut me out of the will, Maeve. I told them to forget I exist. Maeve let out a long, slow breath over the receiver. Good. I opened my eyes, slightly surprised. Good. Yes, she said fiercely. You're not wrong, Sloane. They fear your independence. You have never been wrong. They fear your independence because they cannot control you. Your father needs everyone to depend on him, and you never did. Harper needs a shadow to look bright, and you refuse to stand in the dark. They are disenchanted of you. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away quickly. Validation from her meant more to me than a lifetime of my father's empty praises ever could. Stay away from them, sweetheart, Maeve advised, her voice gentle now. Build your own life. Let them drown in their own arrogance. We talked for a few more minutes before I hung up. I felt a sense of finality settle heavily over my shoulders. The bridge was burned. There was no going back to that boardroom ever. I walked to my bedroom, peeled off my damp clothes, and crawled into bed. The storm outside raged on, but for the first time in my life, I felt a strange, quiet peace. I thought the worst was over. Aunt Maeve was right. But when I woke up the next morning, my phone was buzzing with hundreds of notifications. Her prediction had turned into a nightmare. The morning light was harsh and unforgiving, filtering through the bedroom blinds and hitting my face like an accusation. I reached out for my phone on the nightstand, squinting at the bright screen. The battery was drained to 10%, the screen choked with notifications. Texts from numbers I didn't recognize, missed calls, Facebook tags, Instagram mentions. My chest tightened with a sudden, cold panic. I opened Facebook. My heart sank to the floor. There it was. Tegan had not just shared the video in the private family group chat. She had posted it publicly on her timeline. The caption read, "Family dinners are always a blast. Watch the outcast get what she deserves. Hashtag Mitchell Family Drama hashtag by Sloane." I pressed play, my hands trembling slightly. The video was shaky, recorded covertly from her lap under the oak table. It captured my father's booming voice, the red-faced fury as he called me a worthless burden. It caught Harper's smug, satisfied smirk. And then it showed me. Standing up, my voice steady, delivering my exit line, telling them to erase my existence. The video already had tens of thousands of views. It was being shared in the local social circles, the elite country club pages, the private networking groups of the city's wealthy elite. The comments beneath the video were a horrifying mix of fake sympathy, cruel mockery, and gleeful gossip. Wow, Gideon finally put her in her place. Took long enough. I always knew she was the problem in that family. So disrespectful. Harper handles the pressure so much better. Sloane always was a mess. The humiliation was a physical blow. It felt like someone had kicked the air straight out of my lungs. My private pain, my defining moment of breaking free, had been turned into cheap, consumable entertainment for the wealthy and bored. The irony was suffocating. My family spent millions of dollars every year maintaining an image of flawless perfection, yet they were perfectly willing to air this toxic, brutal moment just to punish me. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone heavy in my hand. Professional panic threatened to overwhelm the personal pain. Clients might see this. My professional reputation as a composed, strategic crisis manager could be shattered by this public display of messy family dysfunction. I was supposed to fix scandals, not star in them. I threw the phone onto the mattress and walked into the bathroom. I splashed freezing cold water on my face, staring at my pale reflection in the mirror. I had to get ahead of this. I needed to draft a press statement, reach out to my current clients, and assure them that my personal life would not affect my professional output. I had to control the narrative. I walked back into the bedroom just as the phone started ringing. It was an unknown number. My immediate instinct was to ignore it, assuming it was a nosy reporter from a local gossip blog or a distant relative calling to gloat. But the PR strategist in me knew you never ignore an unknown variable during an active crisis. I swiped the screen and brought the phone to my ear. Sloane speaking. Miss Sloane, a deep, incredibly calm voice replied. My name is Hayes. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Vanguard Hospitality Group. I froze in place. My breath caught in my throat. Vanguard Hospitality Group. They were the biggest, most aggressive competitor to my family's hotel chain. They catered to the same ultra-wealthy demographic, fought viciously for the same prime real estate, and vied for the same massive corporate accounts. Hayes was practically my father's sworn enemy in the business world. "Mr. Hayes," I managed to say, forcing my voice to remain perfectly steady despite the racing of my heart. "What can I do for you?" "I saw a video this morning," he said. There was no mockery in his tone, no pity. Just a clinical, calculating observation. "It is making the rounds in the country club circuits. It is quite the spectacle." My stomach dropped into my shoes. "If you are calling to discuss my family's internal affairs, I am afraid you have the wrong number. Have a good day." "I have no interest in your family's drama, Sloan," Hayes replied smoothly, stopping me before I could hang up. "I am interested in you. I watched that video very, very closely. Your father was screaming, losing his temper, projecting his insecurities. Your sister looked like a child playing dress-up in an executive chair. But you were entirely composed. You looked at a multi-million-dollar inheritance, a lifetime of comfort, and you walked away without your voice shaking once. You did not flinch." I stood silent, gripping the edge of my wooden dresser. "I need someone who does not flinch," Hayes continued. "Vanguard is expanding. We are launching a massive rebrand to capture the younger corporate demographic, the exact demographic your father is currently alienating with his outdated methods. I need a crisis strategist and a brand architect who operates with cold, hard logic. Someone who understands the hospitality industry from the inside out, but is not blinded by traditional, old-money arrogance." He paused, letting the heavy words sink in. "I want to hire you, Sloan. I want you to lead Vanguard's new communications division." I blinked, my mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. This was not a pity offer. This was a strategic, ruthless move. He knew my background, he knew my skills, and he saw a golden opportunity to bring in someone who knew his biggest competitor's weaknesses intimately. "I am an independent consultant, Mr. Hayes. I do not work in-house," I said, testing the waters, negotiating even when I was bleeding. "Then we will be your primary client," he countered instantly, without missing a beat. "I want you to build an empire of your own. A firm that answers only to you. Vanguard will be your anchor client. I am prepared to offer a retainer of $600,000 for the first year, with a massive performance bonus tied directly to our market share expansion." $600,000. The number hit me like a physical force. It was 10 times what my father had offered me to be Harper's shadow. It was more money than I had ever seen in a single contract. It was absolute freedom, wrapped in a weapon. "There is one condition," Hayes added, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dead serious. "Name it," I said, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Ang I dua cho twa emoticon so keen twain gung tho. And hung diu kien di kem mwala Thursday tuk su lan thay doi kuok choi." 2 days later, I sat in a sleek, glass-walled conference room at the very top of the Vanguard headquarters, looking down at the city skyline. I was reading over the final contract. The heavy paper felt monumental in my hands. It was flawless. The terms were exactly what Hayes had promised over the phone. $600,000 guaranteed, full creative and strategic autonomy, and a generous budget to build my own team. I picked up the heavy black pen from the table, took a deep breath, and signed my name. Sloan. No family title attached. No Mitchell legacy. Just me. Hayes, sitting across from me in a tailored charcoal suit, smiled. It was a sharp, predatory smile of a man who knew he had just acquired a lethal asset. "Welcome to the winning side, Sloan. Let's get to work." That afternoon, I officially registered my new firm, Vanguard Strategies. I didn't want a cute name. I wanted a name that sounded like a fortress, an undeniable force in the market. The next 6 months were a grueling, exhilarating blur of caffeine, whiteboards, and relentless execution. I rented a modest, but highly professional office space in a high-rise downtown, far away from my family's properties. I hired a small, elite team of data analysts, PR specialists, and digital marketers. We were a lean machine, built for speed and precision. My primary mission was to rebrand Vanguard Hospitality from the ground up. While my family's chain was stuck in the past, obsessed with dark wood paneling, stuffy dress codes, and outdated print marketing, I pushed Vanguard violently into the future. We launched aggressive digital campaigns focusing on sustainability, modern corporate flexibility, and streamlined luxury. We targeted the exact demographic my father was ignoring: young tech executives, modern entrepreneurs, and international digital nomads who hated traditional hotel stiffness. The principle of my work was simple: show, don't tell. We didn't just buy ads saying Vanguard was modern, we proved it. We sponsored major tech summits, redesigned the hotel lobbies to function as high-end co-working spaces with flawless Wi-Fi, and aggressively managed our online reputation to maintain a perfect 5-star rating across all platforms. I worked 15-hour days. I barely slept. I lived on black coffee, takeout food, and pure adrenaline. But for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't exhausted by the effort. I was fueled by it. Every late night, every successful pitch was a brick in the foundation of my own independence. The results were undeniable. I measured my success not in praise, but in hard numbers. Within 4 months, Vanguard's online engagement had skyrocketed. By month 6, we had successfully poached 3 major corporate accounts directly from my family's portfolio. Hayes called me into his office one morning to show me the quarterly report. We had increased Vanguard's brand value by 40%. "You are a machine, Sloan," Hayes had laughed, pouring us a celebratory glass of sparkling water. They have no idea what is hitting them. While I was thriving in the shadows, building my fortress, my family was doubling down on their arrogance. I kept tabs on them, not out of longing, but out of strategic necessity. You have to know what your enemy is doing. Harper was, predictably, a disaster. She treated her role as director of brand image like a personal vanity project. She hired expensive, trendy photographers to take pictures of herself lounging in the hotel lobbies. She threw lavish, pointless parties that drained the marketing budget but generated zero return on investment. My father, blinded by his favoritism, continued to praise her in the press, calling her the fresh, youthful face of luxury. They thought they had won. They thought that by exiling me, they had purged the family of its only problem. Then, Harper decided to make her move against me. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was reviewing a contract for a secondary client, a medium-sized restaurant group that I had retained from my freelance days. My phone rang. It was the CEO of the restaurant group, a usually jovial man who now sounded incredibly uncomfortable and tense. "Sloan, I am so sorry," he stammered over the line. "But we are going to have to terminate our consulting contract with Vanguard Strategies." I frowned, immediately pulling up their file on my computer. "Is there a problem with the service? Our last campaign drove a 20% increase in reservations for your downtown location." "No, the service is fine. Excellent, actually. It is just, well, it is a conflict of interest." He paused, taking a deep, shaky breath. "Harper called me. She offered us a heavily discounted catering partnership with your family's hotels for the next year. But the strict condition was that we drop you immediately. She implied that working with you might damage our reputation in the local scene." Harper. She was using the family's massive resources, taking a financial loss on catering, just to steal a small, insignificant client from me, just to prove a point. She wanted to remind me that she had the power, that she could still hurt me, even from afar. "I see," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Thank you for your honesty. I will send over the termination paperwork this afternoon. Best of luck with the catering." I hung up the phone. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry. I didn't call my father to complain. I simply pressed a button on my desk phone to save the recording of the call. It was a habit I had developed, recording business calls for quality assurance. Now it was evidence of anti-competitive behavior. Harper thought she had struck a fatal blow. She thought she was being incredibly clever, using Daddy's money to step on my toes. She wanted me to react, to call her screaming, to beg my father to make her stop. I did none of those things. I just smiled at the recording file saving on my desktop. It was a cold, calculating smile. Harper had just revealed her greatest weakness. She was so obsessed with petty sabotage, so focused on ruining me, that she was completely ignoring the massive, structural cracks forming in her own empire. She was playing checkers, trying to steal my lunch money, while I was playing chess, slowly surrounding her king. While I was building my empire in the shadows, Harper was busy with only one thing, trying to drag me deeper into the mud. Harper thought she had won. Little did she know that her arrogance was about to ignite an explosion that would engulf my father's entire legacy. Thank you for watching this far. If you support Sloane's strength, please comment, "I'm win." This is a special sign for the amazing viewers who have watched this far. I will like and reply to all comments containing the keyword "I'm win." Remember to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next explosive part. The restaurant client was only the beginning of a much larger, much more desperate campaign against me. Once Harper realized that I had not simply vanished into the shadows, that I was still operating a business in the exact same city and breathing the exact same air, her petty sabotage morphed into a full-blown obsession. She was not satisfied with simply wearing the unearned crown my father had handed her. She needed to make sure I was exiled from the kingdom entirely, starved out, and forgotten. Over the next few weeks, I started hearing familiar whispers echoing through my industry contacts. The hospitality and public relations sector in this city is a surprisingly small, incestuous world. Everyone talks, and secrets are the primary currency. My team at Vanguard Strategies caught wind of the rumors almost immediately. Harper was actively using her brand new title as Director of Brand Image and the massive, intimidating weight of the Mitchell family checkbook to subtly blacklist me across the eastern seaboard. She would attend high-profile networking dinners, draped in designer gowns paid for by the corporate account, drink a little too much expensive champagne, and drop carefully calculated comments about how I was mentally unstable. She told potential clients that I had not quit, but that I had been forcibly fired from the family business due to erratic, unpredictable behavior. She weaponized my silent departure, spinning a dramatic narrative where she was the long-suffering, dedicated younger sister who had to bravely step up and take the reins because her older sister was having a total psychological breakdown. I knew exactly what she was doing. My lead data analyst, a brilliant guy named Marcus who could track a digital footprint through a blizzard, came into my office one Tuesday morning looking deeply concerned. He shut the glass door behind him and handed me a tablet. He told me that 2 mid-level corporate clients, a boutique investment firm and a luxury travel agency, had suddenly gone freezing cold on our proposals. When Marcus dug into their social calendars, he found out that Harper had taken their lead executives out to a lavish, 5-course lunch at our family's flagship property just 3 days prior. She had comped their meals, handed them premium suites for the weekend, and poisoned the well. I did not panic. I did not send angry, emotional emails to my father demanding he put her on a leash. I did not confront her in public. I simply started building a file. Every single time a client backed out after interacting with Harper, I documented the financial loss. Every time a vendor mentioned a nasty rumor she had spread at a country club mixer, I recorded the date, the time, and the exact phrasing. I saved the recording of the restaurant CEO terminating my contract. I was meticulously gathering ammunition, bullet by bullet, for a war she did not even realize we were fighting. Harper genuinely thought she was playing a brilliant, ruthless game of corporate warfare. She thought she was being a shark. In reality, she was a blindfolded child swinging a baseball bat inside a fragile glass house. She was so hyper-focused on destroying my small, independent reputation that she was entirely neglecting her actual job. The Mitchell hospitality empire was quietly bleeding revenue, and she was too busy gossiping over imported caviar to look at a single spreadsheet. The pressure from my father and the board of directors must have been mounting behind closed doors because Harper suddenly decided she needed a massive, headline-grabbing victory. She needed to justify her ridiculous salary and her position as director of brand image. She needed to prove to the skeptical older board members that she was the creative visionary my father constantly claimed she was. She proudly announced to the industry press that she was launching the largest, most expensive marketing campaign in the history of the Mitchell family hotels. She called it the Elevated Elite Initiative. Through my deep network of industry sources, I managed to get my hands on the preliminary outlines and storyboards of her campaign weeks before it was scheduled to launch. I sat at my sleek desk late one night, the city skyline glowing outside my window, reading through the leaked pitch deck. I actually felt my jaw drop. I had been in public relations for a decade, and it was the most tone-deaf, arrogant, and outrageously offensive marketing strategy one had ever seen in my entire career. Harper's brilliant, groundbreaking idea was to market our luxury hotels by directly mocking budget travel and working-class hospitality. The campaign featured highly stylized, cinematic videos of wealthy, glamorous models dripping in diamonds, sneering at regular people in crowded airport terminals. It showed them laughing at families pulling up to roadside motels and physically rolling their eyes at anyone who did not carry a designer leather luggage set. The proposed tagline, printed in elegant gold font across the screen, was literally, "Because you belong above them. Leave the ordinary behind." It was a catastrophic misread of the current social and economic climate. Modern luxury consumers, especially the younger corporate demographic that brought in the real money, did not want to be associated with blatant elitism and cruelty. They wanted subtle exclusivity, eco-friendly sustainability, and ethical business practices. They wanted quiet luxury. Harper was trying to sell loud, obnoxious snobbery in an era that actively despised it. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop until my eyes burned. The phone was sitting right there on my desk. I could have picked it up. I could have called my father, swallowed my pride, and warned him that this campaign was a ticking time bomb. I could have saved the family business from a public relations slaughter that would cost them millions. For a brief, fleeting second, the old, ingrained instinct to protect them flared up in my chest. But then I remembered the mahogany boardroom. I remembered the red-faced, spit-flying fury of my father pointing his finger at me, calling me a worthless burden in front of 20 people. I remembered the devastating silence of my mother and Harper's smug, satisfied smirk as she watched me walk away into the pouring rain. I reached out and closed the laptop. The screen went black. I picked up my pen, pulled a Vanguard Strategies file toward me, and went back to work. I was not their janitor anymore. If they wanted to strike a match and set their own house on fire, I was going to sit back, pour myself a drink, and watch it burn to the ground. Harper thought she had won the game. She did not know that her blind arrogance was about to ignite a fire that would swallow my father's legacy whole. The Elevated Elite campaign launched on a Monday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, the internet was systematically tearing the Mitchell family empire apart, piece by bloody piece. It started, as these things always do, on Twitter. A prominent social justice advocate and travel blogger quote-tweeted the main promotional video, pointing out the gross, classist undertones. They highlighted the specific scene where a model in a $10,000 silk gown literally scoffed at a tired mother holding a crying baby in a standard hotel lobby. Within 4 hours, the tweet went massively viral. People were furious. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of the messaging struck a raw nerve with the general public. It was not just poor taste, it was actively insulting to 99% of the population who could not afford a $2,000 a night suite. My team at Vanguard Strategies had a massive digital analytics monitor mounted on the wall in our central office, where we tracked industry trends and competitor metrics. We stopped working and gathered around it, watching in real time as the sentiment analysis graph for the Mitchell hotels plummeted off a cliff. The red line indicating negative mentions shot straight up into the stratosphere. It was a digital bloodbath. The hashtags #MitchellSnobs and #BoycottMitchell trended globally by Tuesday night. By Wednesday morning, the mainstream media had picked up the scent of blood. Morning talk shows were dissecting the commercials over coffee, calling the brand out of touch, offensive, and disgustingly out of date. Late-night comedians were using Harper's tagline as a punchline. But the fatal blow did not come from the general public or the comedians. The public forgets. The industry does not. The killing strike came from the hospitality industry's most feared and respected voice. His name was Mercer. He was a veteran hospitality journalist and a senior industry analyst whose written opinions could literally make or break a luxury brand. He was a man who valued deep integrity, flawless service, and despised flashy, hollow marketing. On Thursday morning, Mercer published a scathing, full-page editorial in the leading financial newspaper in the country. The headline was brutal: "The Fall of the Mitchell Empire, When Children Play House with Millions." I read the article over my morning coffee in my office, completely mesmerized by his surgical, merciless precision. Mercer did not just attack the tasteless campaign, he attacked the core leadership. He openly questioned Gideon's competence as a CEO for allowing such a spectacular disaster to bypass quality control and go public. He dug deep into Harper's resume, or lack thereof, explicitly calling her a Nepo baby with a devastatingly shallow understanding of the modern market, whose only qualification is sharing the CEO's last name. He pointed out that the Mitchell brand was rotting from the inside out, blinded by old money arrogance and a refusal to adapt. The financial fallout was instantaneous, brutal, and quantifiable. Corporate clients do not like controversy. They despise it. They do not want their executives, their board members, or their partners staying at a hotel chain that is actively being boycotted and mocked on national television. By Friday morning, the massive cancellations started rolling in like a tidal wave. 3 massive tech companies pulled their annual executive retreats. Several high-end, celebrity wedding planners relocated their clients to our competitors, primarily Vanguard. Through my discreet contacts inside the Mitchell accounting department, I learned the exact numbers. It was staggering. In a single, grueling week, the Mitchell family hotels lost $15 million in canceled bookings, severed corporate contracts, and refunded event deposits. $15 million gone, evaporated into thin air, all because Harper wanted to feel superior on a billboard. The stock price took a terrifying nosedive. The shareholders were panicking, flooding the investor relations lines with demands for answers. That Friday evening, an emergency board meeting was called. I was not there, of course, but the hospitality industry in this city is a remarkably leaky ship, and secrets bleed through the walls quickly. I heard the exact details from a junior executive who was desperately looking to jump ship and had called me begging for a job at Vanguard. The boardroom, the very same oak-paneled room where my father had publicly humiliated me, was a chaotic war zone. The investors and board members were screaming. Gideon tried to do what he always did to maintain control. He yelled louder. He blamed the public for being too sensitive. He insisted that the outrage was a temporary fad that would pass by next week. But the board was not listening to his booming voice anymore. They were looking at the $15 million hole in their quarterly projections, and they were looking at their own shrinking portfolios. They demanded that Harper be removed from her position as director of brand image immediately. Gideon, blinded by his toxic, unwavering loyalty to his golden child, flatly refused. He pounded his fist on the table and told them he would handle the crisis internally, that he would guide his daughter through it. That was when the lead investor, a ruthless, icy businessman who cared only about his financial returns and cared nothing for family sentiment, slammed his own fist on the table and delivered an absolute ultimatum. He told my father that the Mitchell name was currently toxic waste. Internal PR could not fix this. A simple apology tweet would not stop the bleeding. They needed a top-tier, aggressive, third-party crisis management firm to step in, clean house, and restructure the brand narrative immediately, without emotional bias. And the investor already had a specific firm in mind. He had been closely watching the market for the last 6 months. He had seen the miraculous, highly profitable rebranding of the Vanguard Hospitality Group. He had seen Vanguard's stock steadily rising while the Mitchell stock was drowning in controversy. The board gave my father an ironclad ultimatum. Either he signs a contract with Vanguard Strategies by Monday morning, relinquishing full control of the crisis response to them, or the board would hold an emergency vote to forcibly remove him as CEO by Tuesday afternoon. My father was completely cornered. His immense pride, his fragile ego, and his entire life's work were on the line. He had to bow his head and beg the firm that was currently destroying him in the free market for help. The board of directors gave my father an ultimatum: either find a top-tier crisis management firm to clean up this mess, or they would fire him. And there was only one firm they trusted. Vanguard Strategies operated under a veil of strict corporate confidentiality. It was the cornerstone of our business model. Our sleek, minimalist website listed our comprehensive services and our incredibly high success metrics, but it deliberately did not list our executive team or feature employee headshots. In the elite, high-stakes circles of corporate crisis management, anonymity is a powerful weapon. The furious investors who forced my father's hand knew that Vanguard Strategies was the absolute best firm in the business right now, but they did not know who was actually pulling the strings behind the curtain. They did not know they were sending my father directly into the lion's den. Monday morning arrived crisp, cold, and bright. I woke up early, feeling a strange, electric calm thrumming in my veins. I bypassed my usual business casual attire and chose a tailored, sharply cut slate gray suit. It fit perfectly. It felt like psychological armor. I arrived at my office 2 hours early, meticulously double-checked the dense financial documents I had prepared over the weekend with haze, and waited. At exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, the notification chimed on my computer. A message from the receptionist at the front desk popped up on my screen. Mr. Gideon Mitchell and Ms. Harper Mitchell are here for their 10 o'clock appointment. I smiled. A slow, deeply satisfied smile. I typed back my response: offer them sparkling water. Let them wait for 20 minutes. Do not engage in small talk. Let them sit in the lobby. Let them feel the heavy, uncomfortable weight of their desperate situation. From the high-definition security cameras integrated into my office monitors, I watched them. The Vanguard Strategies lobby was aggressively modern, designed to intimidate and impress. It was all polished concrete floors, floor-to-ceiling soundproof glass, and sharp, imposing geometric lines. It was a stark, intentional contrast to the stuffy, dark wood, velvet-lined lobbies of their aging hotels. My father was pacing back and forth across the concrete floor, clutching a battered leather briefcase to his chest like a shield. His face was drawn and haggard, his skin lacking its usual healthy, ruddy color. He looked 10 years older, deeply tired, and visibly uncomfortable in a space he did not control. Harper was sitting on a sleek, minimalist leather sofa, desperately trying to look unbothered and superior. She was furiously scrolling through her phone, probably checking the endless stream of hate comments still flooding her social media, but her leg was bouncing nervously, a rapid tapping of her designer heel against the floor. She was wearing massive designer sunglasses indoors, a pathetic, transparent attempt to hide from a reality she could no longer manipulate. They thought they were walking into a sterile meeting with a group of faceless, greedy corporate executives who would eagerly take their massive retainer fee, pat them on the back, and clean up their mess quietly. They were still performing. Even now, facing financial ruin, they were still trying to project an air of superiority and old money power. After exactly 22 minutes, I pressed the intercom button and told my assistant to bring them back to the main glass boardroom. I walked into the boardroom a few minutes before they reached the end of the long hallway. The room was suspended high above the city, offering a panoramic view of the skyline. I took the heavy leather chair at the absolute head of the long glass table. I spun the chair around so it faced away from the glass door, looking out over the sprawling city below. I folded my hands quietly in my lap, steadied my breathing, and listened. I heard the heavy glass door swing open on its silent hinges. I heard the familiar, heavy, commanding footsteps of my father and the sharp, frantic click of Harper's heels on the floorboards. I want it made very, very clear from the beginning. My father was saying loudly to my assistant, his voice carrying that same old arrogant, booming tone he used to terrify his employees, that we are the client here. We expect full discretion, no leaks to the press, and we expect a comprehensive strategy outline by the end of the week. Time is money, and we are losing millions because of a ridiculous misunderstanding by the overly sensitive press. He was still in complete denial. He was standing in the ashes of his empire, still calling a $15 million disaster a misunderstanding. "The CEO is ready for you, Mr. Mitchell," my assistant said smoothly, her voice perfectly neutral. She gestured toward the high-backed leather chair at the head of the table before stepping out of the room and closing the heavy glass door softly behind her. The room fell into a heavy silence for a few seconds. I heard them walk closer to the table, pulling out chairs. I could feel their presence, heavy, anxious, and expectant behind me. "Listen here," Gideon started, clearing his throat loudly to establish his dominance in the room. "We are prepared to offer a highly substantial retainer to your firm, but I demand full, unmitigated approval over any press releases or public statements your firm issues regarding my daughter's campaign." I grasped the cold metal armrests of my leather chair. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the ghost of the worthless burden, the invisible child who used to cry in her room for their attention, vanish into the air completely. I pushed my foot off the floor and slowly spun the heavy chair around to face them. My father adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and walked into the glass-enclosed conference room. But when the chairman's chair turned around, his smile froze on his lips. The silence in the room was absolute. It was not the tense, pregnant silence of a difficult corporate negotiation. It was the suffocating, terrifying silence of reality collapsing in on itself. My father stopped dead in his tracks. His hand, which had been confidently reaching out to pull back a chair, froze suspended in midair. The color drained from his face so fast he looked genuinely ill, his skin turning a sickly shade of gray. His mouth fell open slightly, his eyes wide and unblinking, staring at me as if I were a vengeful ghost that had just crawled out of the floorboards to drag him to hell. Behind him, Harper literally dropped her expensive designer handbag. It hit the hardwood floor with a loud, heavy thud, spilling lipsticks, gold credit cards, and mints across the room. She did not even flinch. She did not bend down to pick it up. She just stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of profound, uncomprehending confusion and sudden, paralyzing terror. I sat comfortably in my chair, my posture relaxed, my back straight, projecting completely commanding authority. I did not speak immediately. I let them drown in the silence for a long, agonizing minute, letting them process exactly who was sitting in the throne they had come to beg before. "Good morning, Gideon," I finally said, my voice smooth, clinical, and entirely devoid of warmth or familial affection. "Harper, please have a seat. We have a staggering amount of numbers to discuss today." My father stammered. The great, booming patriarch of the Mitchell family, the man who had terrified me for 32 years, was reduced to a stuttering, incomprehensible mess. "Sloan? What in God's name are you doing here? Where is the executive team? Where is the CEO?" "You are looking at her," I replied, leaning forward and resting my elbows on the cool glass table, clasping my hands together. "Vanguard Strategies is my firm. I built it. I own it. The angry investors who threatened to fire you on Friday night? They sent you to me. They know I am the only crisis manager in the city who can fix the catastrophic, amateur mess your daughter made of their portfolios." Harper finally found her voice. It was shrill, panicky, and entirely predictable. "This is a trick. Dad, she set this up. She probably paid Mercer to write that article to ruin me. She is trying to steal the company." I let out a short, dry, humorless laugh. "Harper, you give yourself entirely too much credit. I didn't need to pay a respected journalist a single dime to ruin you. You did a spectacular job of that all on your own. $15 million in 1 week. That is almost impressive in its sheer, unadulterated incompetence." Gideon's knees seemed to give out. He practically collapsed into the chair opposite me, his briefcase hitting the floor beside him. His mind was racing visibly behind his eyes, desperately trying to find an angle, trying to reestablish the paternal dynamic he had relied on for over 3 decades. He tried to put on a soft, fatherly face. It looked grotesque and entirely fake. "Sloan, sweetheart," he began, his voice trembling slightly, reaching a hand out across the table. "If you own this firm, then this is actually perfect. You can help us. You can help the family. We can keep this all in-house. We can fix this together as a team. He was actually trying to play the family card. The very card he had burned to ash in that other boardroom 6 months ago when he told me to disappear. I looked at his outstretched hand, then looked back up at his eyes. I reached to the side of the table and picked up a thick, heavy manila folder. I tossed it across the smooth glass surface. It slid and stopped perfectly in front of his trembling hands. I am not here to help the family, Gideon. I am here to execute a corporate business transaction, I said coldly. Open the folder. He retracted his hand, reached out with shaking fingers, and flipped the heavy cover open. His eyes scanned the first page of the legal documents, and I watched as the very last remaining shred of his lifelong arrogance shattered into a million pieces. While you were busy letting Harper play dress-up in the executive suite and actively alienate your core demographic, I explained, my voice echoing evenly in the quiet room, I was busy analyzing your structural financial vulnerabilities. When the stock dropped last week and the cancellations rolled in, your creditors panicked. They wanted out before the ship sank. Vanguard Hospitality Group, my primary client and your biggest rival, was more than happy to oblige them. I paused, leaning back in my chair, savoring the absolute horror dawning on his face as he read the numbers. Through Vanguard, operating under a holding company, I have quietly purchased 40% of your outstanding corporate debt over the weekend. I am not just your crisis manager today, Gideon. I am your largest single creditor. I own the ground you are walking on. I own the walls of the hotels you built. Harper let out a small, choked gasp, covering her mouth with her hands. I will save your company, I continued, my tone absolute, crushing any hope of negotiation. I will restructure the brand, I will appease the furious investors, and I will stop the financial bleeding by Friday. But I have 2 non-negotiable conditions. Gideon looked up at me, his eyes defeated, hollowed out by the agonizing realization that he was completely, inescapably trapped. What do you want? First, I said, looking directly at my sister, watching the panic swallow her alive. Harper is fired. Effective immediately. She will step down today. She will surrender all her company shares to cover a fraction of the damages she caused, and she will be publicly removed from any association with the Mitchell corporate brand. She will never set foot in an executive boardroom again. You can't do that. Harper shrieked, leaping to her feet, tears of rage and panic streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Dad, tell her she can't do that. You can't let her do this to me. Second, I said, ignoring her completely, keeping my eyes locked with my father's. You are stepping down as CEO. You will take an immediate, permanent early retirement. You will retain a minority stakeholder position for income, but you will have 0 operational control. A new independent board of directors will be appointed, and Vanguard Strategies will oversee the entire transition. Gideon stared at the contract, his hands trembling. Power had shifted, and he understood that the most useless burden he had ever carried now held the lifeblood of his entire family. The boardroom felt like a vacuum, all the oxygen violently sucked out by the sheer, crushing weight of the legal documents lying open in front of my father. He stared blindly at the signature line on the contract, his hands trembling so violently that he could barely hold the heavy silver pen I had provided. Harper was having a full, unhinged meltdown. She was pacing the length of the room, screaming, crying, throwing a vicious tantrum that belonged in a toddler's playroom, not a high-rise corporate office. You are a monster, she screamed at me, her face blotchy and red, pointing a shaking manicured finger in my direction. You planned this from the start. You have always been jealous of me. Dad, do not sign it. We can fight her. We can hire the best lawyers in the city. We can sue her for extortion. With what money, Harper? Gideon whispered. His voice was broken, raspy, and entirely hollow. He didn't even look up at her when he spoke. He just kept staring at the paper that spelled the end of his reign. She owns the debt, he continued, his voice barely audible over her sobbing. The investors are backing her. We have no liquid capital. You lost $15 million in 5 days. We have nothing left to fight with. She checkmated us. Hearing her father, her ultimate protector, The man who had enabled her worst, most toxic behavior her entire life. The man who always fixed her mistakes, admit total, unconditional defeat finally broke Harper. She collapsed onto the leather sofa, curling in on herself, sobbing uncontrollably. She was mourning the sudden, violent loss of her unearned crown, realizing for the first time in her life that there were consequences she could not cry her way out of. I felt a quiet presence at the door. The glass swung open smoothly, and Aunt Maeve stepped into the room. I had invited her specifically for this exact moment. I wanted her to witness this. She stood quietly in the corner of the room, her arms crossed over her chest, wearing a small, fiercely proud smile on her lips. She didn't say a single word. Her presence alone was a silent, powerful validation of everything I had fought for. Gideon slowly looked up from the contract. His eyes met mine, searching desperately for a trace of the desperate daughter who used to beg for his approval, who used to cry over ruined paintings and stolen school projects. He found nothing. Only the cold, impenetrable wall of a businesswoman who had beaten him flawlessly at his own game. Sloan, he choked out, a single, pathetic tear slipping down his weathered cheek. You are destroying your own family. Is this what you want? To ruin us? No, I replied, my voice steady and resolute. I am saving the business. The family destroyed itself a long, long time ago. Sign the paper, Gideon. Or I will let the investors tear you apart tomorrow. He looked down, placed the tip of the silver pen on the thick paper, and signed away his empire. When he finished, his shoulders slumped as if a physical weight had crushed him. I reached across the table, pulled the folder back toward me, meticulously checked the signature to ensure it was legally binding, and handed it to my assistant, who had just stepped back in. File this immediately, I instructed her. And release the prepared press statement regarding the change in Mitchell leadership to all major financial outlets. I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket, looking down at the two broken people who used to dictate my worth. The Vanguard transition team will be at your corporate offices tomorrow morning at exactly 8 o'clock, I said coldly. Have your desks entirely cleared by then. Security will escort you out if you linger. I walked out of the room, Aunt Maeve walking proudly right beside me, leaving them sitting in the smoldering ruins of their own arrogance. I didn't look back. Not even once. 6 months later, the dust had finally settled over the city. Vanguard Strategies did exactly what I promised the investors we would do. We executed a brutal, highly efficient restructuring of the Mitchell Hotel brand. We stripped away every trace of Harper's elitist, offensive marketing. We fired the bloated, useless executive staff that Gideon had hired based on cronyism rather than competence, and we modernized the entire operation from the ground up. It took relentless work, late nights, and ruthless decision-making, but by the end of the second quarter, the bleeding had officially stopped. The stock price stabilized, climbed back to its original position, and the massive corporate clients began returning, trusting the new management. I saved the company, but I made no attempt to save the relationships. After that day in the boardroom, I cut them off entirely. My mother called me dozens of times over the following weeks, leaving long, tearful voicemails begging for forgiveness, pleading for us to be a family again now that the business was safe. I blocked her number. I blocked Tegan, the cousin who had filmed my lowest moment. I blocked every relative who had laughed at me, every cousin who had shared that video, every aunt who had stood by silently and watched me be treated like garbage for 32 years. Harper was forced to move out of the city. Without her massive, unearned salary and her endless corporate credit cards, she was forced to figure out how to live like a normal person. From what I heard through the industry grapevine, she was miserable, working a mid-level retail job and complaining to anyone who would listen about how her evil sister stole her life. Gideon retired to his isolated country house. The man who desperately needed to control everything and everyone around him was left with absolutely nothing to govern but his own bitter regrets. I was sitting in my corner office on a Friday evening, sipping a glass of wine, looking out over the glittering city lights. The dark, painful museum of my past was finally closed, boarded up, and demolished. I had built an untouchable fortress in its place. I was wealthy, I was independent, and I was completely free. Many relatives left voicemails calling me cold-blooded. They said I was cruel for stripping my own father of his power and pushing my younger sister out into the cold world. They said that blood should mean something, that unconditional forgiveness is what families are supposed to do. But after everything they put me through, I have to ask you, did I go too far, or are they simply paying the rightful price for their own cruelty? Thank you for watching this story to the very end. If you think Sloane did the right thing by taking back her power, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on more explosive family drama stories.